our approach to investing is so simple. It's not rocket science what we're doing here. It's understanding history. It's understanding commonalities between certain properties that perform a slightly little bit better than other ones and focusing on getting them under our control.
I love that, bro. Like, property is so simple that you want to make it harder. G'day, guys. It's Ben and Simon here. Super excited, bro.
We're back.
Welcome to the relaunch of the Pumped on Property Show podcast. This is the new episode 1. Stoked with what we did in the past, but it's going to get a shitload better now.
Oh, no doubt about it. I think everybody deserves a little bit more from us and a bit more strategic. So we've just spent a couple of months really planning what we're going to be doing moving forward with the podcast and really excited about the future and just getting things going again.
Yeah, like I feel like Eminem when he did Recovery album, he's like, yeah, I'm sorry.
Right.
I'm sorry to everyone for what the sort of content I've been putting out in the last year. I definitely don't feel like I've been showing up as my best. And I'm just super excited, man, to go to that next level and to talk about what we actually love, what we're actually doing, and just make it more conversational, more back to sitting at the bar, sitting at the beach, you know, training at the gym, driving to work, stuff that you can put on in the background of your life and know that me and Simon are here, that we care, that we want the absolute best for you. And, you know, that's sort of the vibe we're taking now.
Yeah, and we kind of wanted to kick off episode 1 with a bit more of an understanding as to why we're doing this, because we have pretty big aspirations for ourselves and every single person that we connect with, whether it's through the podcast, through our YouTube channel, through our business, through our emails. You know, we ask a lot and we hope for a lot as well. So why don't you break down our why we do this?
You know, the underlying thing, which is super funny, but this is like where I'm coming from now in this business. I was watching The Lorax, which is a Dr. Seuss film, the other day with my kids, and I've watched it about 100 times. And then there's this one little line at the end of the video, and every single time I watch the movie, I literally just tear up. And the line is, unless someone like you cares an awful lot, nothing's going to change. It's just not. And I'm like, that is where we're coming from. Like, that is us. We just give so much more of a shit than any other person that I've ever met in this space. And so the whole business, the whole podcast, the whole YouTube channel, the Instagram is absolutely coming from that place, because what I believe that if more of us care, and then if more of us achieve financial freedom, things will get better. Because, you know, I've watched the change in my life from a fear-based lifestyle, an anxiety-based lifestyle, a hustler-based lifestyle, through to, you know, starting to really work on myself in a different way.
Exactly.
And that's changed everything for me. So I believe that when people can achieve financial freedom, things get better, because when you have choices that aren't based on fear, that aren't based on not enough, that aren't based on you having to show up to something you may or may not like, everything gets better. And so, you know, we believe the more people we can help get financially free, and the more financially free we can get ourselves, the better it's going to be for all of us.
Yeah, like, it's really our passion. It's certainly my passion. And what we're doing here is, you know, as a business, we're investing in property. Personally, we're investing in property, but that's just the vehicle to financial freedom. And that's really the end goal. And what I'm so passionate about, what Ben's so passionate about, is helping people achieve that, and not just buying one property or just doing this. It is the journey, and that's what it's all about. You know, you've been hustling on this journey for over a decade now.
Yeah,
like, it's definitely a journey, and I'm sort of 3 years in to my journey as well, so at different sort of levels. And I'm really excited to share that journey with everybody and teach everyone that, you know, it doesn't matter where you're at, we've got a lot of living to go.
Completely.
And we can always strive for a better day tomorrow than our day to day. And that's not to say that today's a bad day. It's just to say that we can do better, we can be better, and we can help one another achieve that.
You know, my vision for this podcast, and for all of you guys out there that are listening to this, and ladies as well, is to help you understand that you don't have to be one-dimensional. You don't have to just go hard for the next 15 years and sacrifice your lifestyle, your health, your relationships. You know, the choices that me and Simon make now on our way to financial freedom are all around family, friends, meaningful work, contributing in a positive way, spending time with my kids, you know, surfing, training, doing meaningful stuff outside of our work as well, like living our values, moving well, like connecting with our bodies, and just trying to like live in a balanced way across the board, because I don't believe anymore, like I did when I was 20, that success is measured by your status, your job, your house, your car, the amount of zeros in your bank. I truly believe that success to me looks like someone completely living in flow in their own version of their life.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And that's what we want to help people understand, is it's about the journey, and it's not about one or the other. It's about the combination of all these things so that you can be happy. And yeah, my understanding of success is driven by happiness. It's how happy are you in your life with what you've created. And one thing that you've been doing and you've taught me recently as well is just understanding your values, living your values, and incorporating that into your path and into your journey.
You know, for me today, this is the most meaningful thing that I could be doing. Like, I'm just obsessed with this. Marketing and content creation is my favorite thing. That's what I did in a past life before I started this business. And it's just so nice now to bring the best versions of ourselves, because I feel like in the past I've been quite guarded with what I share as a person. And I was talking to one of the guys in the office, Linton, about this earlier this week, and I was saying, man, it'd be epic to see you add a little bit more of the flavor that you have with us and your friends to our clients. And I was sort of thinking to myself, there was like a mirror there. Like, I need to do the same thing. Like, I find it difficult to be vulnerable and to open up. And so I'm going to commit to trying to do that as we move through this journey, and just whatever's showing up, whether it's good or bad, anxiety or happiness, just be on this journey together and have a bit of fun with it.
Hell yeah. No, I'm really excited about it, and I hope you all can join us on this journey, on this path, and we'll see what we can do with it. We want to get really engaged with all of our listeners and subscribers as well. Like, we want to hear from everybody, and you know, preach what you really need to hear and what you really want to hear over the coming years. You know, this we ain't going anywhere.
No, without a doubt. So, you know, in terms of where we're going, just so you guys can have a laugh back at this in 5 years, the initial goal is to just completely own the Australian property space. But own isn't the way that everyone else is measuring it. By own, I mean add the most value, get the absolute best results, and bring the most and highest quality feedback to you guys. So that's where we're coming from, and that's what we're looking to do. In this podcast today, though, we just wanted to share a little bit about our approach to life, our approach to investing, and a little bit of our personal journeys. Just, I know a lot of you have heard from us before, but for those of you that are new, just wanted to share a bit more about our backgrounds, and, you know, me maybe not keeping as much of it to myself as I have in the past as well.
Yeah, for sure, man. We'll get there. We'll open up, and I've always been pretty happy to express who I am, and I kind of wear my heart on my sleeve. I don't really hold the cards close to my heart. I'm terrible at poker. Which is cool, you know, so I guess we can, you know, take a little bit from one another there. So yeah, I guess giving everybody a bit of an understanding on our approach to life is probably the best place to come from, which we've briefly touched on. To me, it's about happiness, and it's about living in the present moment, but it's also massively about being a better version of yourself tomorrow than you are today. Continuous improvement in all aspects of life. You know, to me, I live an extremely active lifestyle, but I'm starting to learn to kind of slow down a little bit and appreciate those things in life, getting into a bit more meditation and things like that over the last few years, which really helps me with clarity and to kind of figure out this crazy journey that we're all on. You know, there's going to be ups and downs, there's going to be flat periods, but it's all good things. And if you can just come from that place where you're not trying to be better from an egotistical perspective, but you're just trying to be better because why not? You know, I think every single person, especially those people that's listening to this podcast right now, has so much to offer the world, and you're doing the world a disservice by not striving to be the best version of yourself and and project that out there. So that's kind of, a little bit about where I'm coming from.
I love that, man, because I was, you know how at certain times of your life you start to see messages, and it might just be what you're looking for. It might be intuition, or it might be the universe speaking to you. Wherever you sit across that, and I probably sit across all three of them, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, something that I heard or saw last weekend was this quote, "Don't be afraid to trade good for great." And I think I've been hearing that same thing so regularly. Like, I feel like I've been showing up as good, but I want to show up as great. And it's not going to be every minute of every day, but I want to consistently work towards moving that dial. And, I was reading in bed last night for an hour before I went to sleep, a great book by Ryan Holiday called Stillness is the Key. Massively recommend it for anyone who has gone through any sort of anxiety, depression, or is just at that stage of life like I am at the moment, which is like, I've learned a heap of cool stuff and I'll take some of that forward, but it's almost like a shedding stage of life too, where you're like letting go of past identity, letting go of parts of past self, and just redesigning who you want to be. And for me, when I talk about my approach to life, it's living my values. Like, just to put this in perspective, 2 years ago, I was in such a dark place with anxiety that I said to my psychologist, Zach, I don't know who I am anymore, or what I am, or what I believe in. And he said something to me which I'll never forget. And it was like, Ben, you are your values and you are your moment by moment choices. That is who you are. So he's like, figure out what it is that is meaningful to you and that does create that happiness or contentment or presence, and then make choices. He calls them, and I call them, towards decisions. Like, how does this get me closer to my values? And since then, certain things that I was using, like social media, like subscribing to 1,000 emails, like having my phone on me constantly, like feeling like I needed to take my work, or even my work thoughts home, like just so many things have been stripped back. And another quote on my vision board at the office at the moment is like, it's about the daily decrease. It's a Bruce Lee quote. And I think my approach to life at the moment is just to be the best dad that I can be in that moment. Sometimes I'm a really shit dad, because like I'm just not present. And other times I feel like I'm doing as good a job as anyone else.
Yeah, no,
and
it's perfect.
It's the same in business. It's kind of like, I just want to work with a really small number of people that get that life is about working with great people. It's about achieving great things, but not in the old school way of smashing your way there like everyone else talks about.
Yeah, you can work smarter, not harder. I think that's becoming a really popular phrase nowadays. You know, work smarter, not harder. And that's definitely what we want to do. And even just planning for the podcast, right? We're sitting down and we're like, let's plan this, let's strategize this like we would our investments or our business. And it's like, if you can just, focus your energy into something like that, the results are going to come, right?
Jay said it to me for the second time. She's our marketing manager here at Pumped. She said, she's like, Ben, I've heard you 600 times in the last 2 months say to your clients that you will never start investing, which I never would without a plan. She's like, so why every week when we talk about our videos do you not plan anything? And, it was a slap in the face that I needed. And I think, being open to change, growth, and hearing the things that you might not want to hear is what's enabled me and Simon to succeed. And I think it's probably a pretty good segue into our approach to investing, which mine has been banging into walls until I figured out the straight line.
Yeah.
Where, now I realize how easy it was to find the straight line. Hopefully that's what we can share with you over the next 500 episodes.
Yeah, definitely. And our approach to investing is so simple. We invest in residential houses in Australia. It's as simple as that. We focus on major metro markets. We employ low risk strategies, and we try and reduce debt long term, like in a really short elevator pitch sentence. Like, that's the way that we look at it. It's not rocket science what we're doing here. It's understanding history. It's understanding commonalities between certain properties that perform a slightly little bit better than other ones, and focusing on getting them under our control.
I love that, bro. Like, property is so simple that you want to make it harder.
Yeah. Oh,
like,
man.
You want to make it harder.
I was listening to a Gary Vee thing the other day and it resonated with me so much. And it was about simplicity. And he's like, sometimes simplicity is the key.
Yeah.
And he says,
always simplicity is the key. I bet he didn't say sometimes.
Yeah, always. That's
Yeah.
so true. And he said, all the time we actually overcomplicate things in our own lizard brain.
Yeah.
So I guess, you know, the way that we've been taught about investing and banking and accounting and finance and all of this, it seems difficult and it appears difficult because that's the way that we've been taught. But sometimes we significantly overcomplicate things in our own mind, which hold us back from just doing what needs to be done.
You know, my approach to investing is I'm the kid in the candy store and I want everything. So like what I say is I want the most capital gains.
Mm-hmm.
I want to buy at the best time in the cycle so I can make short to medium term gains. I want a property that I can add some value to. I want insane cash flow and I want max tax benefits. And I'm like, am I asking for too much?
No.
And it's like most people slip into, and most companies in Australia slip into one of those things. I'm just like, fuck it, I want all of them.
Yeah.
And I've created a process with you that enables us and our friends and our family and a small number of clients to achieve that. And that is a really special thing. Like, but that's taken 10 years of like figuring it out. Like I've bought 13 properties now in the last 10 years. Thankfully, I sold most of them because most of them were duds. And you've obviously bought your 3 in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Far out, that's been quick.
Been a big 2 years.
Massive 2 years. Chill out for the rest of the year.
That's what I always say. Like I always say, oh, next year's going to be a break year. And then I talk to one of my friends and they're like, as if, Simon, like, come on, get real. You're going to be doing something.
You got to do something.
That's cool. Like, as I said, you know, I have an active lifestyle and I mean that in every sense of the word as well. Like I like projects. I like doing things. I like moving forward. So
Yeah.
it's just the way that it is. But coming back to the approach in investing, you know, there's sort of 5 fundamentals, which you just mentioned in your approach, that we try and focus on for every single one. So why don't we sort of break down those 5 fundamentals? First one, starting with capital growth. We say this is the most important fundamental for every single investor. You should be focusing on purchasing assets that are going to grow in value over time.
You know, capital growth, again, is simple once you understand the science behind what makes capital gains. So Metro, the reason being it's outperformed regional by how much in the last...
It was 20 years. The comparison between the 7 metro markets and the 7 largest regional markets.
86% difference.
Yeah.
You know, so if that's not the biggest slap in the face you ever need to hear, like imagine getting $100,000 today and then actively choosing to lose 85% gains on that in the next 20 years by putting it down a path.
Yeah. And you couple that with the other one, which is houses versus units. Very similar. Study was done 25 years comparing houses versus units in Australia, and the houses have outperformed the units by 96%. Now, if you're buying in major metro markets and you're buying houses, you're already doing better than what a lot of people are.
Yeah, without a doubt. Like I think capital gains come back to houses in metro markets. And then if you want to overlay the third fundamental of that, which is some data based off Michael Matusik, if you can buy walking distance to the beach or within 20 Ks of a city, you're doing even better.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't have to be more complicated than that, but because it is, I'll give you like the next layer. The next layer, once you've ticked off those things, is the best suburbs, the best parts of the city, the best streets, the best pockets of a suburb, the right size land. And in future videos, we'll go into what makes an incredible capital growth property and how you can outperform the market by a couple of % per year through following the things that we do.
That's what we want to do. We want to get super specific and break this stuff down over a number of episodes so that you've got the blueprint. So the second fundamental to us is cash flow as well. I see cash flow being equally, maybe slightly less important to capital growth, because for me, I want a property that pays for itself. I just don't understand losing money to make money.
No, negative gearing to me is like the devil. I've been there. I had 9 properties at one stage and 4 of them were negatively geared. And you know, when I did lose my job before I started this business, it was no fun. Like there was a bit of pressure there, which I didn't need. There was pressure there when my wife went on maternity leave for our first and second bub, and I don't like to feel that hanging over my head, and so I changed my course. Now, I will never go for cash flow or capital growth alone, and so when I'm talking cash flow for me, and there's 1,000 different ways to do it, all I'm really talking about is dual income, 2 incomes rather than one. I'm not talking chasing apartments with high cash flow. I'm not talking about chasing crazy Airbnbs or regional properties or commercial properties. I'm just talking about quality CBD property with 2 incomes instead of one, which in parts of Brisbane you can do, parts of Perth you can do, Adelaide, parts of or all of Sydney you can do. And, you know, that's constantly changing, so you've got to stay up to date. But that's what we're talking about with cash flow, and that's why we're able to get 5 to 7% yields on our properties versus the 2 to 3%, which is the average at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to generate that cash flow, and sometimes you need to become a little bit more active, but it definitely can be done. And I think for us as investors, we sort of think outside the box. We don't do what normal investors do. We do different things, and that's why we're able to target these. So cash flow is key. You want to be able to maintain the lifestyle that you want to live. As we talk about, it's the journey, and you don't want a portfolio that's going to dramatically affect that journey and put even more financial pressure on yourself. So if you can have some positive cash flow properties that provide you with a small passive income, life's good, baby.
Yeah, life is good when you've got positive cash flow, because you get choices with cash flow, and it loops right back to the why for us, which is once you've got financial freedom, whatever that looks like for you. Like for me, when I first put a number in the sand, my base living cost was 18 grand a year. And I'm like, if I can just get 18 grand, I won't have to I'll be sweet. And then it was like, okay, now I need 50. Then I've got 3 kids soon to be in private school. And it's like, okay, maybe I need 100 to keep my head above the water, but that's okay. Like, your life stage change.
Journey.
It's the journey.
It's a journey. It changes for sure, and you gotta be willing to move with it.
I remember when I first started the business, even I had this goal. It was the biggest vision I could see in my mind at the time. It was like, if I could just work with one amazing person a month, 12 a year, I would be sweet. And it's like, it's an incredible thing, the journey and how things change. But
and then the first year was 40.
Yeah. But, you know, it's like, it's a cool thing, cash flow. And I think what choices give you is time with family, time with friends, the ability to go through a market like the coronavirus, and as bad as this is to say, to not stress on it.
Yeah.
You know, to spend more time with the people you care about, to leave that job you hate, to take that risk like I've done in the past, where it's like I went from a 200 grand a year income to a 40 grand a year income because I knew in my 20s the skills were more important than the short-term money. And to do, you know, things with your time, like travel. There's people that just do want to sit on a beach for their lifetime, and if that's you, that is completely cool. There's people that want to work 80 hours a week for their lifetime too, and if that's you, cool. Like, we've been on both ends of the spectrum, and now we're trying to find our own balance.
Yeah, exactly. Now the third is timing. Timing can be a little bit tricky as well, but I see it as something that can be relatively simple, because if you focus on the 2 prior fundamentals, capital growth and cash flow, you know where you need to be focusing, major metro markets, and the past generally paints a pretty interesting picture of where we're gonna, what could potentially happen in the future.
Phil Anderson calls the past like remembering the future. Like, Simon and I both really understand history, and because of that, it enables us to not predict the future, but to remember that things work in cycles and patterns which other people don't see because they haven't spent 5,000 hours looking back like we have.
Exactly, and it runs in cycles. The property market runs in cycles. At periods it goes up, at other periods it goes backwards, at other periods it sits flat. So it's essentially a cycle, and what we want to do is ideally buy as close to the bottom as we can and avoid buying at the top or in a declining market. It is as simple as that, but then you got to figure out how do we know when we're at the bottom or when we're close to the bottom.
You know, there's 2 schools of thoughts on that. One is there's timing-based investors like myself that have put in the time to understand it. And, you know, then there's people And there's another philosophy, which is just, it's all about time in market, and whoever holds the properties for the longest or the shares for the longest ends up winning if it's blue chip stuff. So again, we'll have to go into that into future episodes. But what I can say is it doesn't have to be any more complicated than this. If you bought in Sydney in 2011 or Melbourne in 2011, that would have been great timing for the bottom of the market. You know, people might go, well, it's gone crazy since then. But if you know your history, you'd know in the 9 years before that, Sydney did less than 1% per annum. So it was getting very affordable, more population pressure at the time, very low vacancy rates, no supply, a lot of international migration. All of those things were like a perfect storm. But people knew about that 5 years before that was going to happen. Like, in fact, some people like Phil Anderson and Fred Harrison predicted that 20 years before. So it's like understanding that and knowing that that would have been good timing. Good timing as a seller in Sydney and Melbourne would have been 2016 or 17. Yeah, you might have missed a tiny bit on the top, but you got out safely, and now nothing's happened for the last 3 to 4 years. And so that's all we're talking about with timing. It isn't complicated, but it does require an understanding of the bigger picture.
Definitely, and there's multiple different things that I can't wait to dive into a little bit more on that.
I love timing. It's my favourite thing in property.
Yeah, longer macro cycles and timing, and then smaller local Australian-based cycles as well. So we will certainly unpack that in the future. Now, number 4, manufacturable value. I think this is a massive one, as it gives you options. And I think every investor should be trying to purchase assets that gives them options, where they're not boxing themselves into just one particular strategy or one particular result, something that's going to allow you to take matters into your own hands if the market's not doing what you want it to do.
I love that, bro. Like, some of the ideas that Simon and I apply is buying off or below market value, or that's, you know, very easy at sometimes, like at the bottom of the GFC or at the bottom of the coronavirus sentiment.
Yeah.
Very easy now, like not so much in the future, very easy again.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's one way. That's the hardest way to do it. The easier way is to, you know, create something of value. So buy an unrenovated home or a blank piece of land and then build at a good price or renovate at a good price and create value. Other ways are more sophisticated, like subdivisions, developments, townhouses. I just keep in my little lane, which is buying cheaper and below market value and then adding value to something that I've bought versus, you know, putting it all in there. I heard about 6 years ago that 98% of developers that are professionals go bankrupt within 20 years. And I went, well, I'm a business person and a low risk investor. I don't want to play that game.
The numbers don't lie.
Yeah.
You know, it's a risky game, and I talk to lots of people all the time, and the thing is with property, guys, is it's done very well in Australia long term, very well. So there's always going to be some sort of success story in any different asset class. So just understand that and try and figure out what's your lane. What do you value align with? What's going to get you specifically to where you want to be in the future? And not worry about all this fluff, because there's always going to be a success story. There's always going to be somebody that did well through a development or a flip or a subdivision or whatever it is. But that doesn't mean that you're going to be able to repeat that or replicate exactly what they did. So that's why we focus on the fundamentals. That's why we stick to our lane. We stick to what's worked time and time again, because I don't want to become unstuck. I don't want all of the hard work and time and money that I've poured into these investments to be taken away from greed.
I love that, bro. Like, I think when we come back to that conversation at the start, which was our approach to investing, the most tricky thing for me as someone who was getting started and trying to figure all of this stuff out in the last 10 years was finding what resonated with me, what I was prepared to take on in terms of my risk appetite, and, you know, a very, very, very clear strategy. And it was only really after reading Phil Anderson's work that I went, oh shit, I've made a massive mistake. That was my first thought. Second thought was, okay, I need to clear house, and that's why I sold 6 or 7 properties in a period of 3 years. And now I've rebuilt a portfolio based on the 4 fundamentals we've just talked about, and the 5th, which is depreciation. And so I think it's just super important to note that it's going to take time for the chips to settle. It's going to take time to find the right strategy. you know, what I would do if I was starting again now, or if I was in a position with 1 or 2 properties, would be to think and talk to exactly what Jay said this morning, like actually plan for what I want first. You know, on the weekend, for example, I went to an auction. I got a bit emotional like you do. It went for 150 grand more than I was expecting. I was trying to make it work. And then that night I went home and I went, what do I really want? And what I really wanted was to stay in my current home, which I love, to invest in a number of properties that tick those 4 or 5 boxes that we're after, and to have a higher quality of life without the pressure of a massive another debt hanging over my head. And I went, this doesn't align with that. And it was an immediate and easy decision to just let go of, like, the property passed in at the auction and me and one other guy were going for it. And I'm like, hang on, like, step back. You know, as Ray Dalio says, like, there's 2 steps to decision making. Learn first, then decide. When most people just decide and then learn. And that's what I did for the first 7 years. But now I step back and I learn first and then make my mind up.
Yeah, a lot of the time that ego loves to creep up, and that old understanding of success likes to creep up, and you really do have to suppress it throughout this journey and push forward and just continually focus on that longer term picture. And in that planning phase, it is so important to make sure that you do understand what life that you want in the future and why you're doing what you're doing, because then when these types of decisions come up, it's going to become a lot easier for you to go, well, yes, I'm emotionally attached to this. Emotion, ding, 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 probably not the best thing to be driving your investment decisions. It should be coming from a place of logic. So as soon as you feel that emotion, you should be coming back to your plan, and you should be going, okay, how does this particular opportunity align to my future position? And if it does, great, you know, you're on the right path. If it doesn't, then make sure that you're aware of that and you don't shoot yourself in the foot with the purchase of a wrong property or something that's just not aligning with your long-term values.
You know, this book, again, I was reading last night, had a chapter, and the chapter title was called Enough. And, you know, the thing that I struggle with, and the thing that a lot of high performers like yourselves listening to this struggle with as well, is the skill set that makes you successful on the way up, which allows you to set goals, allows you to do work outside of business hours, to learn outside of business hours, to put in consistent effort, to save a bloody deposit, which is like the hardest thing in the world, to consistently invest when your friends are buying nicer cars and nicer houses or having nicer holidays. And you know, that is a real tricky thing to balance, especially in modern society, because modern society, you know, the goal is more. The goal is always the next shiny thing. The goal is always measured by other people, like how busy you are, how successful you are, especially in Sydney and Melbourne where we grew up. And it's kind of like this chapter in the book talked about enough. And one thing that I've done recently with my wife is gone, he calls it stepping off the train in the book, and so do I. It's just going, that is not going to make me any more happy. Like setting more goals, spending more time in your head, saving more money, having more zeros in the bank. He talked about it in the book last night. Like only a millionaire knows that a zero in the bank is not going to change the quality of your life or the way that you think or the way that you live. And it's the same with an athlete that's won a major tournament or a major ring. It's like, sometimes you have to go there to recognize that it's not what everybody else is changing and it's chasing, and it's not the true measure of success. And when you realize that, which is what happened to me a few years back, that's why I got massive anxiety, because I went, the way that I've taught myself to be isn't working. What was even worse was the way that society has taught me is not my vision of how I want to live my future. And that's when I said that to my psychologist. I didn't know where I was at, because there was no measure of success that made any sense to me. I liked people that meditated. I liked people that were healthy. I liked people that were successful in business and great investors, but I couldn't see an example anymore of someone that I could put on a pedestal and go, that's it. And so what my wife and I have tried to do is rebuild a life that looks like and feels like the way that we want it to be. And it is such a crazy fucking thing to go through. And I hope everyone listening to this gets the chance to question every single part of their identity at some point in their life. Because like enough is such an important question. And what Simon and I do is we go, how much do we want in the future? For me, I want 4 or 5 houses with 2 incomes each, giving me between 200 and 250 grand a year. That is enough for me for now. And that might feel like a lot to some people, but for me, that's my basic cost covered, a good couple of holidays a year, and the ability to keep a caravan, and like myself eating the organic good shit that I want to eat, training when I want to train, going where I want to go.
Invest when you want to invest.
Invest when I want to invest as well, and to not be tied to any form of other income in the future. And it's a question we don't ask ourselves, and it's going to be one that keeps coming up in this podcast. Like, the sooner you find enough for yourself, the sooner you can close the doors on things that aren't relevant for you, and you can start saying no, and the sooner you can change your life and get to where you really want to be.
No doubt about it. I just love that so much. And we always talk about the goalpost shifting when you are working towards a goal or you're working towards something, because when you get there, once you've achieved it, you realize, oh, this hasn't filled the void that I was hoping that it was going to fill.
Exactly.
No matter what it is. So figuring out that enough is great. And I was having a chat to one of my good friends recently, and I was telling him about my journey and my plans for the future and what I want my life to look like. And I mentioned that, now I've got my foundations. I really just want to work on adding value to them and then paying off the debt. And then once I've achieved that, and I'll also break down that in a lot more detail in future episodes as well. And then once I've got that, then going, okay, well, what do I want next? Because that is enough for the period of life that I'm at right now. Enough to me is having my own home and a couple of these great investment properties owned outright, providing $80,000 to $100,000 worth of passive income. That is the enough for me, and that's what I'm working towards. And he was like, well, if you're just looking for 80 to 100, well, why don't you just keep investing, and then the cash flow is going to provide that? And I'm like, I don't want to be in debt. Like, I don't want to be holding millions of dollars worth of debt. I don't want this dark cloud looming over my head that if shit hits the fan, I'm going to become unstuck. I want choices for life, and to have choices for life, that's my line in the sand. That's my enough. And I'm super young as well, so I've got so much time to go, and it's extremely naive of me to think that I know what my life is going to look like in 5, 10, 15 years time from now. So all I'm working towards is creating a life that's going to support me, allow me to have my choices, and allow me to live, the best version of myself.
I love that, man. Like, I had a conversation with my wife, which was actually really hard on the weekend. Anyone that's in a long-term relationship understands that it's kind of like this. It's this dance where you're aligned and moving in the same direction, and then, you're completely out of alignment. Like, the epic thing about my wife and I is, like, we're like yin and yang. Like, she's my absolute best friend, and she's such an incredible person. She's the most supportive, balanced person that I've ever met in my life. And the reason why I realize now is when you're doing something, or when I'm doing something, you hear a voice in your head commentating. And that's the normal human experience. But there's some people in the world that don't have that internal voice. So her mind is still. Like, when she speaks, there's not a voice narrating. When she's observing the world, there's not a voice narrating. And because she's got that silence in her mind, I believe her mind has got so many more connections than other people have, because it's just, she just gets shit. But so, like, we had a very hard conversation, which was, I found it so difficult to have with her, because, like, our pattern for the last 10 years is to just chase more. To reset the goalpost, to sell this property and move into that one, and then to leverage off that one into this one. And she was at a stage where we went to this auction on the weekend, and she wanted to do that again. Now, she's got identity attached to stuff because she's at home at the moment. She likes to have a big project like that because it adds value to her life and her identity, which I fully get. It's also nice to have something cool to look forward to, but I had to say to her, I'm stepping off the train. Like, I don't want to keep chasing that, because I don't want to get into more debt, and I know for a fact that it's not going to make me any happier or improve our quality of life in any way. And it's the first time in my life where I've actually been able to man up and do that, because I'm a huge FOMO. I fucking hate missing out on a good time, and that started with the boys and now it's with the family. And secondly, like, I'm a huge people pleaser as well, and I think a lot of high performers they come from an environment where they're trying to please someone in their life, and that spills out to everything they try and do down the line. And it's like, I just said to her, I'm like, I just don't want that anymore. Like, the more that I want is I want to add more value to people's lives through the business, through the podcast. I want to spend more time with family and friends. I genuinely want to work less and figure out what else in life that I want to spend my time doing. And it's like, and that's all my choice. And that was fucking hard, because I don't say it in the right way either. Like, it's, you know, like, we've got different love languages and stuff. But it was a huge conversation, and, you know, we may or may not be on the same page, but at least she knows where I'm coming from, and then she can decide where she's coming from and what she wants as well.
Yeah, communication is key with your partner. And I think with this investment journey that most people are going to endure, or anybody that's listening to this will, it's understanding that, you know, communication is extremely important with the people in your life that matter. And I think it's so awesome that you've got that relationship with Lise, and I've got it with Tay, no doubt about it. But taking it away from that one particular idea and, you know, putting it into the journey itself, you know, it is so good to have solid mentors, people like yourself, and everybody else that we've surrounded ourselves with, to have these types of conversations with, and sanity check and things like that. And I guess that's what we want to promote, and help people find that mentor, find that community of like-minded people where you can have these conversations. And, you know, even a few weeks ago, Ben was looking at putting an offer on a property, and we had a bit of a chat, and then I'm just like, well, no, that property doesn't align with your values.
Yeah, it was such a big combo for me, and such a big eye-opener, because Simon sees things differently, and sometimes when you think of it, clearer.
Yeah.
And I see the same thing for him, and it's like,
it's bloody emotional.
It's I remember you said it to me when I was placing the offer. You're like, this doesn't align. And then I tried to make it work, and then the next day I called you, and I'm like, fuck, man, like, I just doesn't feel right. And you're like, it's not right.
Yeah.
And so I terminated the property under due diligence clause, which I had in it to safely exit. And I'm so grateful. Like, no matter where you're at, whether you've bought $300 million worth of property like Simon and I, or for ourselves and our clients, or you're just getting started, you're only as strong as the person, you know, that one or two people in your life that's actually going to tell you how it is. And you are always going to get that from Simon and I. There's not going to be any sugarcoating it, because it's just not worth it.
Yeah, for sure, bro. Cool. So where did it all start for you?
That's like a massive question.
It's a big question, hey, but I think, you know, that gives a bit more context to what we're trying to do here.
So for me, like, the very first thing that comes into my mind when I think about where it started for me was, you know, like, when I was really, really young, interest rates were really, really high, and mum and dad, you know, mum was at home and dad was working, and it was expensive to live. And so, like, there wasn't, as Jim Rohn says, like, a lot of money left at the end of the month.
Yeah. And
so at that stage of life, before my dad started his own business, and he was earning a high income, but when interest rates are like 17%, like, there's just nothing left over when you've got 4 little kids to feed, and you're just trying to put it all together.
And sending kids to a decent school
and putting us through great schools, and, like, you know, 2 cars and everything else that comes with that. And so at that particular time, right, you know, we used to go to Best and Less, and I'd buy shorts, or mum would actually just go to Spotlight and make us shorts, and we'd, like, go choose the patterns and shit. And I was always like, and I see it in my eldest daughter now, there's just some people that are born a little bit less, like, there's the self-confidence is so high, but it's also, like, measured by your external world, where, like, I see, like, Simon, who, you know, has a completely different approach, and so does my second daughter, Harper, and it's like, some people are like that too, where it's just like, no, I don't care what's going on. But for me, I was one of those kids that really cared. And so I remember, like, getting this secondhand pair of Billabong boardies, and for like 6 or 7 pairs of shorts for 5 years, I, like, cut the logo off and stuck it on. And, like, I know that sounds weird, but in terms of, like, what fueled my fire to create an unusual level of success financially really early in my life, it was fucking fighting my way out of what I didn't want in my future. And that was the truth. I was like, I'm going to be, at this stage when I was getting started, like, I was like, I want to be a millionaire. I had no idea why. I wanted to be financially free. I wanted money so that I could like prove to the world that like I was worthy. And it's so fucked up, but you hear that in so many people. Like the original fire burns from like that, and then once you achieve it and you realize it doesn't fill the hole that you talked about before, then if you want to fill the hole without just chasing the same shit for the rest of your life, and in my opinion wasting your entire lifetime, then you start to like fill that hole internally yourself. You know what I mean? And that's what I've been working on. But that was the trigger for me. What about you?
Yeah, it's so awesome that you brought up like those differences, because, you know, you're definitely an older brother.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you're the eldest of 4 siblings, and now that I see it in Summer, you know, she's the eldest of 3 siblings, and I think that comes with a lot of pressure, you know, like, I
was walking at the beach with them, sorry to interrupt you, this morning. We went for a massive walk on the sand and through the bush, and I'm like, Summer, can you get Cove over that rock? Summer, can you get Harper through there? And it's like your whole life you're being responsible. And but like, just sorry to interrupt, I was just thinking about it this morning for the kids.
As long as I can remember, you know, that's been the dynamic in our family as well. It's always, you know, Ben, look after, Ben, look after, Ben, look after. And I grew up in a completely different time. You know, by the time I came along, Dad had, you know, made a decent level of success, and my earliest memories are basically us moving into a super nice house.
Fuck, it was a pimp.
Oh, so good. Like I grew up in this, you know, tiny little cul-de-sac. Our house was on the valley of Engadine in New South Wales, and just like had the most awesome western views. We had this really cool pool, like double story. It was just, it was a really good place to grow up. So, you know, I never had any of those insecurities, but I've never had any insecurities my whole life either. I think, you know, maybe during high school I had a few, but not really. And I've kind of just been a bit of a floater up until recent times, like the last sort of 6 years really. In my early 20s, I made a huge change, but up until then, I just never could pinpoint exactly what it is that I wanted to do. I always had this sort of gut feeling that there was something there for me, and there was like lots of opportunity was going to come up in my life. And so that, I guess, gave me a little bit of freedom to kind of just flow and just have that faith that it is going to work out, because everything in my life had up until every single point had just worked out. You know, trust the universe, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
But for me, like the penny that dropped, especially when it comes to property investing, was just the example of my mum's property in Cronulla. She bought a unit for like $600,000 in 2013. Perfect timing. She gutted the whole thing, renovated it, turned it into a really nice apartment, spent way too much money on it, but it didn't end up mattering in the end. So she was into it for like $750,000 or something like that. Held it for, I think, 3 years. Sold it in the end of 2016 for $1.2 million. And I'm just like, what? How much money you make, Mum?
Yeah.
And at that point in time, I was at university, and, you know, that was a big chunk of change. And, you know, this is, you know, finally, like Ben had already been into the investing side of things, but because Ben lived in Queensland and I was living in Sydney, and I was 7 years younger than Ben, you know, we didn't really create like a huge bond until I was sort of 16, 17, 18 years old. And, you know, so we didn't necessarily talk about it too much. And then when this happened, I started to become a little bit more interested in it, and start focusing on wealth creation, and read a few books and was like, oh, cool. Like, there is a way to do this. You know, there is a way to create a life for ourselves where we don't have to work until we're 60, 70 years of age, and we can have choices to create a life that we want. And that's been my driving force, is just to have choices to do whatever I want, whenever I want, not to not work and sit on the beach like we were talking about. Like, I always want to live with purpose. And one thing that I've realized is that think about any person in your life that's over the age of 80, that is still killing it. You know, they're still moving around, walking around, talking really well, coherent. I can almost guarantee that that person's still living with purpose to this day. So they're living with some sort of purpose, and that's, I guess, what my, you know, where I'm coming from, what I'm trying to figure out is that purpose. How can I just do this for the rest of my life and live a long, happy life?
I love that, bro. Like, you know, I always had this underlying belief as well, and it's definitely from mum and dad, that everything was going to work out for us.
Yeah.
Like, I always had that feeling. And it took a while to find the way. And I remember, like, at 20 years of age, deciding after a big party trip to Europe with the boys that I wanted to move to Queensland, and I had no idea why. And I started to really find myself at uni, because I started to, like, enroll in some weird courses like sustainability and health promotion and community development and business as well. And I picked up Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and the second I read it, the penny dropped. I actually wanted to leave uni, but mum and dad are like, no, just finish the degree. And I'm glad I did, because being a finisher is a good characteristic to have, I've learned. Like, people that can finish, you know, and generally end up having choices in their life that others don't. And so I read that book 1.5 years before, and I just got obsessed with property. Had absolutely no ability to save money though, because I was on Centrelink, and I was working as much as I was allowed to not, like, reduce my Centrelink. So I, like, had about $8 a week left over at the end of every week, but I was having the best time, like, with Lisa, and I was also living with all the boys too in Mooloolaba on the sunny coast. And I started to save money the year I left, and then I bought my first 2 properties the year after I finished uni, and that was a huge stepping stone for me. Like, I'll never ever forget the experience. I bought my first property, which was a unit with city and water views in Miranda, you know, but I bought it with 2 friends because we, I don't know,
Couldn't afford to,
or / like, just didn't want to keep saving / didn't want to do it on our own because we were all petrified
/ didn't know the repercussions.
Yeah, didn't know the repercussions. And I remember going for, like, beers that night in Bondi, after signing off all the documents on the day of settlement, and just, like, we're just sitting there on the beach having these beers. We're like, we're going to take over the world. We're going to build a property empire. We're going to, like, do this and that, like, all, like, 24-year-old stuff.
The funny thing is the 3 of you are so successful now as well.
Everyone is killing it. Like, one of those boys owns a company called EnviroBuild in Sydney, and he just obsessed with lifestyle and sustainability, and he loves his, like, thing. And then the other fellow, Percy, owns part of the Entourage with Jack Delosa, and it's probably the #1 coaching company in Oz. Everyone's gone their own way, but we still just have this, like, banter. Most of the time it's just shit talking each other when we're together having a good time, but, like, then we talk on that level too. That was such a huge step for me. Like, I felt like property, as soon as I found it, just felt right. Like, I could be very good at shares, and so could you, because we're very, very process driven. We're very good at routine tasks, and we're very diligent. But I just love property. Like, I love touching it. Like, I love this wooden wall. Like, I love the renovations and the homes that I've built. And I found that passion straight away. And I'm so grateful that I did. And I hope you guys, through this podcast and stuff, begin to find your passion in it, whether that's Bitcoin or gold or buying water and selling it, or shares or bonds or property or business, whatever it is. I just highly recommend you go all in on one thing for 10 years. And then once you're successful in that, as Dennis Waitley used to say in a book that I used to love from him, it was just like, once you're successful in one thing, people think you're, like, got life figured out.
Yeah.
And then you can be as broad as you want. But the problem is, so many people, myself included, for my 20s, didn't go niche enough. And the second you go niche, you become an expert, because I've already put over 10,000 hours into property, and so have you now. It's just close to. It's like shit starts to change.
Yeah, I came from the exact same experience when I moved to the sunny coast. I had no idea if I was going to like property or not, but I definitely was ready for a change in my life. And
was this first trip or second?
Second. Yeah.
So after the USA trip, where I was like, oh my God, Simon's amazing. You got to move to Queensland then.
That was cool, like, opportunity. We went to a little trip in America, and when I got back, Ben, twice actually I've been overseas and got back and been offered a job straight away. It's nice to go traveling and then walk straight back into a job.
For sure.
But it was, really cool to have that change. And I hadn't even finished uni yet by the time I moved up here. I was still studying part-time while I was working up here and finishing it off because, I was kind of like 1 foot in the door, wasn't really sure, and then started learning the very fundamentals, started reading all of the books, spending time around the team, inspecting properties, meeting real estate agents, looking at previous case studies, and I'm just like, just rapid fire. Like I did exactly what you said. Like I've just completely put the blinders on, focused on property for the last 3.5, almost 4 years now, with no regard for anything else necessarily, anything else except property, and just really laser focused. And I'm just like, this is so cool. And the more that I do it, and now, that was just the learning phase of it. Then it was sort of the executing phase where you buy your first property and you're thinking about all the different things that you can do with it, and you start playing with compound growth calculators in the future.
Wow.
And what sort of position am I going to be in if I hold this for X amount of years, Y amount of years? And
if I hold these 10 properties for 40 years, I'll be worth 60 mil.
Yeah. And it's just really, really interesting and completely fueled my passion. And now I just want to, share that with the world and help other people find that as well. And I think it's so important to incorporate your passion into your journey, because you don't want to be pushing a rock up a hill. It's much easier to be pulling. And if you've got the right why, and if you've got the right reasoning for what you're doing, it's going to be so much easier for you when through those tough years, through those challenging periods, when you've got to make a really hard decision, or you're just bored as all hell because
you can't do anything,
property's slow.
Yeah.
Having that really, having that passion or having that really strong why to pull you through those times is going to make the journey just so much better, so much easier.
Not everyone's why. Not everyone likes property as much as I do.
Yeah.
I get it. At the start, it was a means to my end. My end was financial freedom and choices as soon as possible. I wanted to never work again by 30 when I was getting started. I'm like, I don't know why. That was just my little silly goal that my 19-year-old self set for myself, and I didn't achieve it, and that's cool as well. But it's kind of just, whatever your why is, financial freedom allows you to have a completely different life. And, I think if I come back to my vision for this podcast and for our relationship with you guys, which we hope is very much two-way and you guys can become part of our family, it is, unless someone like me or you cares an awful lot, nothing's going to change. And it's if you start by deeply caring about yourself and your own future and investing in yourself, and then slowly investing your surplus income into something that's going to give you a passive income, and unless you decide that you want your world to change, because the hardest thing for me to get was, it was dependent on me to create the change that I wanted to create. And that was so much personal responsibility, but it's those decisions to not do that thing and do this, or to do this thing and not do that, has completely changed my life 2, 5, 10 years later now in such a positive way. And I genuinely want everyone that becomes part of this community to have that sense that I'm doing this for more than me. Start with you and then figure out a reason beyond yourself. If it's your family or your friends, or it's about leveraging your skill set in the non-for-profit sector, or if it's just about becoming a baller and helping other people become one too, whatever it is, give a shit. And that's where we're coming from. Everything is about who cares the most wins in our world now. And it's we care the most and we will do everything because of that to get better. And that's such a pull way to do it, as opposed to what the Wolf of Wall Street calls the bulldozer, which is just pushing through every wall. That's the way I did it for 10 years. It's exhausting, trust me.
Yeah, it's hectic.
So exhausting.
And it's, what's the alternative as well?
Well, the alternative sucks, man.
Yeah. Doing nothing.
Fucking working a shit job forever, not spending time with your kids, living on the pension without choices.
Nah, not for me.
It's not for me, hey.
And I don't want it to be for any of you listeners out there.
I've seen it. One of our grandmas ended up on the pension. She had no choice. She had 8 kids. Her husband died really young. She had to bust her ass off her entire lifetime, but she got to 97, smile on her face, like completely clear in the mind, super healthy body. And it's like, even through all of her adversity, she chose to like live the way that she wanted to live. And that's so inspiring. Our other grandma literally bought one home in DY, sold it, and was able to retire in exactly the way that she wanted to, with heaps of money, and set all of her kids up from just one thing.
Yeah, one property. It's just crazy.
You know.
They bought that for £6,000 in the 40s, I think it was.
Yeah.
And
Maybe even less, man.
yeah.
It's crazy.
And sold it for over $2 million in 2016 in Sydney. And yeah, they were able to pass that on when she passed away to two of my mum's siblings who never owned a property, had rented their whole entire life.
Both single mums their whole lives.
Yeah, allowed them to get into the property market. It allowed mum to wipe her debt on her own home completely. And, you know, who knows what our uncle did with it, but he probably paid off a lot of debt on his home as well. And
Bought a nice car
like,
as well.
I want to be able to do that. You know, I want to be able to do that for my kids and my grandkids, and leave a legacy and create that generational wealth. And, you know, that once again is living with that higher purpose, and it takes it, you know, even further than yourself.
I love that, bro. Like, that's a huge why for me. And the other why for me is just, when you've got time and you've got skills, you can, like, this is going to be 50 to 100 years of like major positive changes in the world. Like, people are getting so much more conscious. You know, the situation with certain things are getting like a lot more pointy ended, and it's going to be an incredible period for humanity. And I want to be one of the people like leading positive change.
Yeah, change maker.
Yeah. So I think that's like an epic start to our convo, which is our new podcast.
Thanks for making it this far. If you have, guys, really appreciate it. Yeah, moving forward, it's just going to be crisper, better, more enjoyable. So please share this with a friend.
Yeah, please give us a 5-star review. The only way for people to really see this is if you share it or give us reviews, so that Apple and Spotify value it. But, you know, either way, we're going to be up there, and we're going to be bringing this message, and we're just super excited to be on the journey. For all of the old listeners, thank you so much. So good to catch up with you. For all of our previous clients that listen to our stuff religiously, we love you guys. And for those of you that might come into our lives in the future, we can't wait. We're super excited to meet you, and super grateful for your time today.